Coach, thanks first off for taking the time to do this interview today. I'm going to start off with, I guess, the most pressing new issue or new development, I should say, that's popped up with the roster move. Uh, Maybe you can shed a little light of what went on to lead to the release of Mason Bourcier.
Yeah, Mason is a great guy. We like him a lot. I think that he just basically, he said to us his heart wasn't in it. I think he was a little bit unsatisfied with where he kind of fell in the rotation, and maybe wanted a little bit more opportunity or a little bit more playing time. But excuse me, but you know, um, like I said to Mason, it's we want guys that are going to be in Winnipeg that their hearts are in it, they're committed, and um, I think for him, it was tough for him to kind of figure things out. Um, and from my side, I just kind of got a little tired of all of the unhappiness and things like that. You know, Mason is a great young guy, great family, and we appreciate everything he did for our team. Last year we brought him in, and I took responsibility for the change in roles. I took responsibility for his inconsistent role. When we moved off to Teddy and brought in Justin, his role changed. Mark, Mason, went to more of a two, and we felt like that was the best place for him to play. When he came back, we wanted to try to give him a consistent role, and I tried to take responsibility for him. What happened with his minutes and opportunities last year, and give him a fresh start and a new chance. But there's no guarantees in sports, and from our standpoint, we had an open competition for the backup point guard spot in preseason. Jeffrey James clearly organized the game better than Mason. So we decided, hey, we're going to give him the opportunity to be that connecting two. And I think that if we're just honest, he probably was just not happy that he wasn't getting those opportunities to play. And we're making the best decisions we can for the team. We're playing the guys who we feel need to be out there. And guys like Jeffrey and guys like Lex, they basically had beat him out for those opportunities early in the season. Would we have loved Mason to stay and compete and be a part of the team? Yes, when he's not making distractions and I just think it just constantly became a thing where he was always dissatisfied and unhappy about something. But we like Mason. I like him, and we wish him nothing but the best and his family all the best. So for us, I think the roles become clear in the backcourt. Jeffrey's clearly our backup point guard, and Lex has those minutes at the two. Depth wise, the third point guard on the roster, maybe you slide Mason Krause into that spot. Um, but I think that in general, your team is always better when there's less distractions and people are happy and committed. And I think that's kind of where our team took some small steps forward with the move.
So maybe if we look back to the preseason, right? Like were these issues or things that have been popping up from the year prior? Because when we talked before the season, right? Like one of the big things with Mason was a big culture aspect of it, the continuity from the year before. I mean, he was a fan favorite, things like that. But what were the conversations like? Were the discussions that you wanted to make him point guard? Did he make it clear that he wanted to be point guard? Like where did the miscommunication come? Where the dissatisfaction creeped in?
Well, I think the first thing is that, Mason has to be honest with himself of what type of player he is and what his strengths are. I think that's the point of we all have to understand what our strengths and our limitations are. And, we can't, spend our time trying to be something we're not. I think the first thing for us was, last year he was one of the guys that we could rely on, and he was, a really good member of the team. But there was a lot of emotional ups and downs that we had to deal with behind the scenes. And, from those standpoints, it's, like you say, hey, I take responsibility as the head coach and general manager, and I want to try to work on these things to try to help you. However, there are also decisions that need to be made in terms of who are the best players for these circumstances. And as we say, Mason has a lot of strengths and a lot of talent and a lot of skills. But one of the things we saw was he was making a lot of, let's say, execution mistakes in practice, organizing the game. Um, and again, we have a short time to prepare the team. We have a short time to get everybody on the same page, and we kind of have an idea of, okay, where are the roles? How are these guys going to fit together? With Mason and Jeffrey, we're like, okay, we got two guys that we think can come in and handle some point guard duties. Who's better? And we evaluated in the preseason. We evaluated that, look, we know what this player does. We know what this player does. And for us, Jeffrey clearly was, the better option in terms of organizing the game. That just wasn't one of Mason's strengths, and I don't think it has been. So, you know, look, we're trying to make the best decisions we can for the team, and we went in a different direction. And again, I think that Mason, rather than coming to me and saying, "Hey, coach, what can I do better? What can I work on?" You know, uh, his agent sent me a message like, "We're asking for a release." So we don't want to do any song and dance. We're not messing around. It's not kindergarten. And okay, we're gonna go our way, and we wish you all the best going yours.
So looking forward now, last year was a tough year for roster turnover, and I know that's a reality in the CBL just in general. But this is pretty early, right? 3 games in, a guy is walking away who was brought back from last year. What's your confidence level like that you're able to maintain the team as is? I mean, obviously, it's been a rough stretch against some two very good teams, particularly in the 3 game skid. But what's the confidence level right now that the guys that you have currently will be staying, or are there other moves that you think are on the horizon?
Well, I think the thing that we do now with the open roster spot from Mason is we try to make a really good decision. We don't rush into a decision and just fill it with just a guy who's just going to. We try to get an impact player at that spot. I think that gives us some roster flexibility right now. I think we all have to keep in the back of our mind that Simi Shittu will join us very soon. That's an impactful roster addition that's planned. And I think that takes a lot of the pressure off a lot of the guys. It kind of puts guys in their natural roles. It's a player that we can play through. So I think from that standpoint, it's a great addition. Simi's really excited. He's been watching our games. I had a great conversation with him yesterday. So I think we're in a really good spot for that. We love what our players are doing right now. I think that this is the one point that we may have had one player that was unhappy, and we've moved off of him. So our team is really together. Our team is really committed, and that's just the nature of pro sports. There's got to be decisions that are made that are not easy. There's got to be decisions that are made that protect the team, and this is one of those cases that I think it's better the move happened now because I feel like we don't want to waste any time right now. We want to be as efficient as we can be, and if a player's not his heart's not into our team pursuing a championship, then that guy does not need to be here. You know what I mean? So from our standpoint, we've got a great young group. They're really working hard. Um, and again, it's early in the season, and I feel like we're really moving in a good direction, improving some things, with still things we need to clean up. So you know, I'm hopeful that let's say the import players will be able to continue to grow and develop. We like them all. And then some of our Canadian guys, we feel like they can get into really comfortable, good roles and keep pushing forward.
With that open roster spot, because you do have the non-Canadian, quota, so to speak. How difficult is it to find an impact Canadian player at this point in the season? It's early in the CEBL season, but to go out and find, an elite, let's say, Canadian. Do you have any ideas? Have you reached out to anybody? Like, how difficult is that going to be to fill that spot with an impactful player?
Well, I think the high level guys they'll arrive later in the summer. Whether they're finishing playoff seasons overseas now in Europe or guys may be involved with some NBA summer league. I think if you're talking about the real first team all league type players, those guys I think will be more willing to join the team a little bit later in the summer. I think the other factor for us right now is I think we've done a good job with guys who are saying, "Hey, I'm committed to play through championship weekend in Winnipeg." So that's another dynamic that you have to consider. There may be a player you really like, but he's playing in Europe and he's upfront telling you like, "Yeah, I can play up until August, but then I got to go to training camp preseason overseas." And I don't know if that's the best interest for us, right? Like for us, the most important thing, the priority is putting the best team out there in late August. So all of these things are things that we've got to consider as we look at the roster moves and roster additions. But there's ongoing conversations that have been going through the traditional basketball season, through our preseason, and up until now. The dynamic has changed for us at this point. That now there's really an open spot, and we'll see what type of interest we can generate from some of the good players around.
And how late are you expecting, or how much more time will it take for Simi Shittu to get into Winnipeg? Any idea?
Yeah, Simi will join us for our road trip in Brampton and Scarborough next week. His season finished last week or so. They lost in the third place game in the Greek League. He had a great year. Um, he's got some personal things going on. He's going to a friend's wedding. He's going to take some time with his family. And I think fans have to understand that, he's played 10 months, super competitive, high level. And he just needs a little personal time to kind of rest and refresh himself a little bit and spend time with his loved ones. But we're really excited for him to join us. As I said, I had a great conversation with him last night. He's got a lot of very good ideas and perspective of how he wants to fit in with the team. And, he's got some good connections on the team already. Emmanuel Acot's a friend, Alex Campbell's a friend. So I feel like it's going to be a natural fit. And I feel like, our team can have a significant upgrade by getting guys into natural positions. And I think Simi's a guy who can play with a lot of responsibility and take the pressure off his teammates.
With that, is there anything else you'd like to add?
About Simi?
Simi, Mason, anything that we might not have covered, or you want to
No.
last
We're
words,
from
I
our
guess?
standpoint, we're really focused on, you know, developing our team, growing our team. Our goal is to control the tempo for 40 minutes. We spent a lot of time talking about time score situations, shot selection the last couple of days in practice. Um, and like for us, it's one of those things where people are watching our team grow and develop and improve day to day, game to game. In many leagues you have preseason games, you have preseason, several weeks to kind of grow. And, we're doing it on the fly. And we've got to make the most of every day. I love the players' attitude and effort to this point, and we're really looking forward to the challenge Saturday at home against Ottawa.
Appreciate you making the time, Coach. Really do.
No problem, Joey. We'll see you at the arena.